Be sure to subscribe to the channel and let's promote respect for the Royal Guard together. Let the whole world see how many of us there are. A woman threw her purse at the Royal Guard, confident she could get away with it. But his reaction stunned the crowd and taught her a lesson she would never forget. The bright sun reflected off the gleaming windows of Buckingham Palace, illuminating the bustling square below. The noise of the crowd dominated the scene. The clicks of cameras, the excited chatter of tourists, and the lively explanations of tour guides. Everyone seemed captivated by the majestic atmosphere of a place where tradition and modernity converged. Standing front and center were the royal guards, as motionless as statues. Their crimson tunics, flawlessly ironed, and their towering bearskin hats exuded the discipline and rigor of their duty. The crowd looked on with awe and respect, but not everyone shared this sentiment. In the heart of the crowd stood a woman, around 40, wearing a bright red dress so dazzling it could blind from a distance. She swung a large purse in one hand, while the other clutched a cup containing something unmistakably alcoholic. Her laughter rang out loudly, drawing attention to herself. "Look at these toy soldiers! I can't believe this is their actual job!" she shouted, her voice rising above the general commotion. A man standing nearby with his young son cast her a disapproving glance. "Respect for tradition seems to disappear alongside good manners," he murmured quietly. The woman smirked, pretending not to hear, and took a few steps closer to the white line that clearly marked the boundary. The crowd collectively held its breath. "What happens if I throw this purse right over there?" she declared loudly, swinging her bag for emphasis and winking at her companions. A nearby guard remained perfectly still. Tall and poised, with a face carved from stone, he radiated an aura of unshakable resolve. His gaze stayed fixed in the distance, but the slight tightening of his jaw revealed that he was fully aware of what was happening. Some tourists began whispering among themselves, and a few pulled out their phones to record the unfolding drama. A young woman turned to her friend. "Do you think she'll actually do it? This is the Royal Guard, not a theme park." But the woman seemed unstoppable. Her eyes sparkled with anticipation, and her voice grew louder with each passing moment. "Let's see what these dolls can actually do." Her companions laughed, while the crowd stood frozen in suspense. The guard remained unmoving, but the tension in the air grew thicker with every second. Each of her exaggerated movements elicited a mix of horror, disapproval, and curiosity from those watching. It was clear to everyone. Something was about to happen. The woman, as if performing on a grand stage, defiantly stepped over the white line, completely ignoring the indignant cries from the crowd. "Get back behind the line! What are you doing?" Her strides were bold, and her smile brimmed with arrogance. The crowd held its breath as she marched straight toward the nearest guardsman. His unmoving figure and impenetrable expression stood in stark contrast to her chaotic energy. "All right, Mr. Stoneface," she proclaimed, lifting her bag theatrically. "Let's see if you can catch." The crowd gasped. Phones were raised to capture the moment, and someone muttered, "She's really crossed the line this time." The guardsman remained motionless, as his duty required. His posture radiated discipline, and his gaze, fixed in the distance, betrayed no emotion. The woman, unimpressed by his stoicism, took another step forward. Then, without warning, she hurled her bag toward him. The bag landed on the cobblestones with a dull thud, just in front of the guardsman. He shifted slightly to avoid contact, but immediately froze again, as though nothing had happened. His rigid stance remained intact, but for a fleeting moment, something sharp and icy flashed in his eyes. The crowd erupted into a murmur, and voices buzzed in every direction. "She's lost her mind! That's the Queen's Guard! How could she do that?" The woman, however, seemed pleased with herself. Her face lit up with the attention, and her laughter grew louder. "Now that's resilience," she declared sarcastically. "Maybe you all could take a lesson from this robot." Her audacity reached its peak as she stepped closer, leaning toward the guardsman. "Well, if you won't react to the bag," she teased with a sly grin, "maybe I should try something a bit more interesting?" The guardsman remained unflinching, but the tension in the crowd grew palpable. Shocked by her brazen behavior, no one dared intervene. All eyes were fixed on the unfolding drama, every bystander holding their breath in anticipation of what would come next. The guardsman suddenly took a step forward. His heavy boots struck the cobblestones with a sharp sound that echoed across the square. His voice, cold and commanding, sliced through the tense atmosphere. "Step back behind the line immediately! You are violating royal protocol." The crowd collectively gasped, almost unable to believe that the stoic figure had moved at all. The woman, who moments ago exuded unshakable confidence, froze in place. Her face paled, and the smug grin vanished. She stammered, It was just a joke. I didn't mean—" Her voice trembled, and her eyes darted around, seemingly searching for someone to come to her defense. The crowd watched in stunned silence, and more phones were raised to record the scene. The guardsman, standing even taller now, fixed his gaze on her with an unyielding expression, betraying neither anger nor leniency. Suddenly, an officer of the royal guard emerged from the crowd. His confident stride and piercing gaze commanded attention immediately. He stepped beside the woman, and without raising his voice, said, "Madam, please follow me. Your behavior is unacceptable." The woman dropped her gaze, her bravado evaporating completely. She slowly took a step back, then another, until the officer gently took her by the elbow and began guiding her away from the square. The crowd sprang to life. Applause rippled through the air, and someone shouted, "Now that's discipline! What a professional!" Others joined in. "Serves her right. A lesson well learned." The guardsman returned to his post, resuming his motionless stance. Yet now he seemed even more imposing, as though the incident had only reinforced his dignity and strength. The crowd gazed at him with newfound admiration, while the woman disappeared from view, escorted by the officer. The video of the incident went viral almost instantly, spreading across every corner of the internet. Millions of views, thousands of comments. What had happened at Buckingham Palace became the day's hottest topic. People were unabashed in their admiration. "Now that's true professionalism. He didn't lose control for even a second." That tourist should have thought twice before acting like that. A lesson for life. "The Queen's Guard is the pride of the nation. That was impressive." The atmosphere at the palace the next day was markedly different. Tourists, usually noisy and curious, now behaved with notable discipline, careful not to break any rules. The white line, recklessly crossed by the woman the day before, had become an untouchable boundary. Cameras were raised only for respectful photographs, and children were quieter than usual. A young man holding his daughter's hand paused in front of a tall and dignified guardsman. He didn't cross the line but bowed his head respectfully and said, "Thank you for your service. You remind us all that honor and resilience are more than just words." The guardsman gave a subtle nod, maintaining his statuesque stance. His towering bearskin hat gleamed in the morning sunlight, and his impeccable posture continued to command admiration. The crowd erupted into applause. The sound of clapping echoed across the square, not out of mere politeness, but as a genuine expression of support, admiration, and respect for a man who had shown that tradition and dignity stood above any provocation. That day became a symbol of the enduring value of resilience, discipline, and respect for culture, qualities that remain timeless, even in the modern world. And the guardsman, who had kept his cool under pressure, stood as a living reminder of the importance of staying true to one's duty.